Welcome back to On the Roll with Matt. Before I begin, I want to say something important. I am not a pastor, I am not a Bible teacher, and I do not claim to have all the answers. I am simply a follower of Christ who is still learning, growing, and being corrected by God. This episode is also different from what I normally talk about on this channel. I usually focus on recovery, disability, mental health, responsibility, and lessons from my own life. Today, I want to speak more directly about Christianity, church hurt, recovery, and accountability. I also want to speak to people who are not Christians, especially those who have been hurt or disappointed by Christians or church leaders. I understand why some people want nothing to do with Christianity. They see hypocrisy. They hear Christians talk about love, grace, forgiveness, and humility. Then they watch those same people act in ways that do not match their words. But I want to encourage you not to let broken people stop you from seeking a relationship with God. People are broken. Church leaders are broken. I am broken, but God is not. This is also deeply connected to recovery. Surrendering to a higher power is a huge and important part of the 12 steps. We eventually have to accept that we cannot heal everything through our own strength. We need help that is greater than ourselves. For me, that higher power is God. But surrender can be difficult when we have been hurt by a church or by people who claim to represent God. If someone used religion to control you, shame you, reject you, or silence you, it can become difficult to trust God. We can begin to think God is like the people who hurt us. Part of healing is learning to separate the character of God from the actions of broken people. 17 years ago, when I began my sobriety, I had to start over with God. I had to build my own relationship with Him. I could not base my entire understanding of God on someone else's beliefs, someone else's church experience, or someone else's relationship with Him. I needed to seek Him for myself. During that time, I was rebaptized at the Dream Center in Calgary. That was part of a new beginning for me. I began growing in my relationship with God, not because every Christian around me was perfect, but because I started learning who God was for myself. That relationship became a major part of my recovery. It did not mean life suddenly became easy. It did not remove every hurt, temptation, or struggle. It meant I no longer had to face those things alone. As my relationship with God grew, I found more freedom. I could begin working through my addiction, my pain, my habits, and the things that kept holding me back. In recovery, we often talk about our hurts, habits, and hangups. Those things do not disappear just because we stop using a substance or acting out in a certain way. Sobriety stops the behavior, but healing requires us to look at what is underneath it. For many people, church hurt is part of what is underneath. That pain needs to be faced. It should not be buried under religious language or dismissed by telling someone to simply forgive and move on. We can bring that pain to God. We can work through it with Him. Finding freedom in God does not mean pretending people did not hurt us. It means their brokenness no longer gets to control our faith, our peace, or our recovery. Recently, I watched a service from a church my wife and I attended in the past. I was not trying to reopen old wounds, but as I listened to the message, some feelings returned that I thought I had already worked through. The hard part was not that I disagreed with the message. I agreed with much of it. That was why it affected me so strongly. I started thinking about the difference between what was being taught and what my wife and I experienced when those same teachings were needed in a real and painful situation. It is easy to agree with a sermon inside a church. The real test comes when we have to live it outside the church. After hearing that message, I felt compelled and convicted to write privately to a leader from that church. I did not write to attack or embarrass him. I did not write to prove that I was right. I wrote as a brother in Christ. Before writing, I had to check my own heart. Was I still angry? Was I trying to get the final word? Did I need someone to admit that I was right? My motives are not always perfect. I struggle with pride, anger, fear, and wanting to be understood. I have to keep giving those things to God. But the conviction remained, so I was obedient and sent the letter. The leader replied and said, "These kinds of conversations are better in person or over the phone." I agreed right away and said I was willing to do either. But that conversation with me still has not happened. I later learned that he reached out and connected with the other people involved in the letter, but he did not follow through with me, the person who wrote it. For me, that confirmed the unhealthy and toxic pattern I was trying to name. Conversations were once again happening around me instead of with me. The people with long histories and close relationships were contacted, while the person raising the concern was left outside the conversation. I cannot know his reasons, and I do not need to guess. I also cannot force someone to sit down with me or call me. This is where recovery and surrender become real. Surrender does not mean doing nothing. It means doing my part and then placing what I cannot control into God's hands. My part was to examine my heart, write the letter, speak respectfully, and remain willing to have the conversation. I did those things. I cannot control how someone responds. What the leader chooses to do with my words is between him and God. I felt convicted to write, and I was obedient. I can leave the outcome with God. The original situation involved a serious conflict. My wife and I asked church leaders for help. We wanted everyone involved to sit down, speak openly, listen, and take responsibility for their part. If I needed correction, I was willing to hear it. If I owed an apology, I wanted the chance to give one. Accountability should have gone in every direction. That conversation never happened. Eventually, the relationships ended. Everyone went their separate ways, and the conflict was no longer visible. But the end of conflict is not always restoration. Sometimes it only means the relationship is gone. I understand that pastors cannot force adults to reconcile. They cannot force someone to forgive, apologize, or change. But leaders can create the opportunity. They can listen to both sides. They can challenge people they love. They can admit when friendship, loyalty, or personal history may be affecting their decisions. The Bible makes leadership accountability a serious issue. James 3:1 says, "Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly." That should humble anyone who teaches God's word. Having a platform does not place someone above accountability. It gives them more responsibility. 1 Peter 5 tells church leaders to care for God's people and to be examples to them. Hebrews 13:17 says, "Church leaders watch over people as those who must give an account." Leaders are responsible to God for how they care for his people. In Ezekiel 34, God warns leaders who care more about themselves than the people they are supposed to serve. God says, "Woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves." This was written to the leaders of Israel, but it shows us that God takes leadership seriously. God cares when weak people are ignored. He cares when hurting people are not heard. He cares when leaders protect themselves, their friends, or their church's image instead of caring for wounded people. 1 Timothy 5 also gives us balance. It says, accusations against a church elder should not be accepted without enough witnesses. Leaders should be protected from gossip, lies, and unfair attacks. But the same passage also says leaders who continue in sin must be corrected. It says, this must be done without favoritism. Biblical accountability is not gossip. It is not attacking someone online. It is not believing every accusation without evidence. But it is also not protecting someone because they are a pastor, leader, friend, or respected church member. Christianity should humble and convict us. The Bible should correct me before I use it to correct other people. If my faith always tells me I am right, but never challenges my pride, anger, resentment, or behavior, I may be using God to defend myself. That applies to pastors and church leaders. It also applies to me. Accountability is not something we only demand from the people who hurt us. It is something we must accept for ourselves. If you are not a Christian, or if you walked away from God because Christians hurt you, I want to say this carefully. God is not broken because people are. The failure of a pastor is not the character of God. The hypocrisy of a Christian is not the character of Jesus. A church failing to help you does not mean God has left you. That does not excuse what happened. It does not mean you must return to an unhealthy church, trust another leader right away, ignore warning signs, or pretend you are not hurt. Working through your pain with God does not mean staying in a harmful situation. Forgiveness does not automatically rebuild trust. Sometimes strong boundaries are needed, but I encourage you to seek God apart from the people who represented him poorly. Bring him your anger. Bring him your questions. Bring him your disappointment and pain. Your prayer does not need to sound perfect. It can be as simple as, God, if you are there, please help me know who you really are, apart from what people have done in your name. That is similar to what I had to do at the beginning of my recovery. I had to start again with God. I had to grow in my own relationship with Him. I had to surrender my life, my addiction, my pain, and my future to Him one day at a time. 17 years later, I am still surrendering. Surrender is not something we do once. It is a daily choice. When we find freedom in God, we can begin working through our addictions, hurts, habits, and hangups with the help of a power greater than ourselves. For me, that power is God. People will still fail us. Christians will disappoint us. Church leaders will make mistakes. But people do not get to define who God is. If you are a church leader, do not let your title become a shield against correction. If you are a Christian, do not protect a person or institution more than you protect the truth. If Christians have hurt you, I hope you will still seek God beyond the broken ways people have represented him. The church does not need to pretend it is perfect. It needs to be humble. It needs to admit when it is wrong. It needs to accept accountability. It needs to live outside the church what it teaches inside the church. People are broken. Leaders are broken. I am broken. But God is not. And our brokenness does not have to be the end of the story. This is On the Roll with Matt. Keep moving forward, keep surrendering, and I will see you next time.